Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we sift through stacks of sources, articles, research, data so you don't have to. We boil it all down.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're tackling a big one, something that touches infrastructure, personal finance. Wind power versus solar energy. Which one comes out on top?
Yeah, it's the perennial question, isn't it? You look at any chart on renewables, and, well, these two are just dominant, visually at least.
Right.
So our mission today, it's not just about, which one can generate more power in theory. It's about figuring out, based on the stuff we've read, which is genuinely more effective.
And for whom? Right. Like for you listening at home or for the big energy companies.
Exactly. Because effective, as you dig into the material, it gets complicated fast.
Yeah, I saw that. It's not just raw power.
No, it's this mix of how well it converts the energy it gets, sure, but also accessibility, the upfront costs, and importantly, those environmental impacts people don't always talk about.
The secondary stuff.
Right. And we need to get into those nuances because, look, renewables aren't just some expensive hobby anymore. They're necessary. They're part of modern life and more accessible than ever.
Okay, so how are we going to structure this?
So we figured, let's first just nail down the basics, how they work. Then tackle that surprising bit about efficiency versus availability.
Yeah.
Then we'll get into the scale, the costs, who it suits best. And finally, the environmental trade-offs beyond just carbon emissions.
Got it. So let's start with the mechanics. Wind power. How does it actually work?
Okay. Wind, it's basically physics, right? Kinetic energy. The wind moves, that's energy. Turbines, huge ones, or even smaller ones, they capture that movement.
Like windmills, basically.
Yeah, essentially. That kinetic energy gets turned into mechanical power. Historically, that might have, pumped water. But now, overwhelmingly, it spins a generator, creates electricity, and that goes onto the grid or maybe into some kind of storage.
And these things are huge, right? The ones you see in wind farms.
Oh, absolutely massive. Utility-scale turbines. We're talking easily over 200 feet tall. Monumental engineering, like you said.
Wow. But the sources we looked at, they really highlight the flexibility of where you can put them. That seems like a big plus.
It is a key advantage. You can put them on farmland, and, the farmer can still work the land around the base.
Right.
Or you see these huge offshore wind farms now, out in the water, even sometimes on top of large buildings. And the theory is, if the wind blows...
It generates power. 247 potentially.
Exactly. Day or night, if there's wind, it's working.
Okay, so that's wind. Now solar. Totally different mechanism.
Completely different. Solar relies on photovoltaic panels, PV panels. These things take photons, particles of sunlight, and convert that light energy directly into electricity.
So no moving parts like a turbine.
Well, not in the generation itself. No intermediate mechanical step like wind. It's a direct conversion. That electricity then, usually goes straight into the building it's attached to.
Or into a battery.
Or into a battery, yeah. Excess power gets stored in a home battery system or even those portable power stations you see now.
And the big selling point for solar, at least based on our reading, seems less about 247 potential and more about individual empowerment.
That's a good way to put it. The sources really hammer home this idea of energy independence, especially for families.
How so?
Well, the installation on a house is relatively straightforward compared to, say, putting up a wind turbine. The panels themselves last for decades, often with pretty minimal maintenance.
Okay.
So for homeowners, it's seen as a direct route to cutting energy bills, maybe even getting off the grid to some extent. Real savings.
All right, mechanics make sense. But now let's hit that comparison point you mentioned earlier, the aha moment, efficiency versus availability.
Yes. This is where just looking at a spec sheet can seriously lead you astray.
How?
Okay, purely on conversion efficiency, how good are they at turning the available resource into usable electricity? Wind wins, hands down.
Really? By how much?
The data we saw suggests those big utility wind turbines, they convert somewhere between 20% and, get this, up to 40% of the wind's energy into electricity.
40%. That sounds incredibly high for energy conversion.
It is, especially when you line it up against solar. Your typical good quality solar panel, it's hovering around 15 to 20% efficiency.
15 to 20.
Yeah. Now, some advanced ones are pushing towards 23%, but still, purely on that metric, wind looks way better. It's just more effective at capturing what nature provides.
Okay, wait, hold on. If wind is getting 20, 30, even 40%, and solar's stuck down at 15 or 20, why isn't everything wind power? That seems like a no-brainer. Why isn't wind the default?
Because that amazing 40% efficiency means absolutely nothing if the wind isn't blowing.
Availability.
Precisely. If you're in a place with very little wind or the wind is unpredictable, that 40% efficiency is converting 40% of zero.
Okay, makes sense. Efficiency needs the resource to be there.
Right. And solar, even with its lower conversion rate, often has a more predictable resource schedule, at least during the day.
You know when the sun comes up.
You know when the sun comes up, you know roughly how intense it'll be based on weather and time of year.
Yeah.
So that 15–20% applies when the sun is shining and the panels aren't, covered in snow or dirt.
So this is why just looking at efficiency numbers is misleading. It's about real-world conditions.
Exactly. And that shifts the whole conversation from pure physics to logistics, cost, and who's actually using the power.
Okay, let's unpack that then. If wind is technically better at converting power when it's available, why isn't it the go-to for the average person? Why don't we all have mini turbines on our roofs instead of solar panels? Scale and cost must be the key.
Bingo. This is the absolute crucial difference. It splits things clearly. Residential user versus utility user.
How so?
For homeowners, small businesses, solar is, well, almost always seen as the more favorable, more practical choice.
Why? Just cost.
Cost is huge, yeah. But it's also accessibility. It's just easier to put panels on an existing roof. The infrastructure needed is less complex, less disruptive, and the upfront cost for a system that actually makes a difference to your bill is, well, manageable for many people now.
Right, lower barrier to entry, you get panels, maybe a battery, hook it up, start saving.
Pretty much. But the second you need massive amounts of power, the economics flip completely.
Towards wind.
Towards wind. Utilities, big industrial operations, they prefer wind because when you build those enormous turbines, and lots of them, the cost per kilowatt of energy generated drops dramatically.
So scale makes wind cheaper per unit of energy.
Yes, significantly cheaper. We saw U.S. Department of Energy data confirming this. Large-scale wind is very competitive with fossil fuels on cost, especially in windy locations.
And those small residential turbines?
They exist, sure, but the energy output is often quite low compared to the hassle and expense of installing and maintaining them. They just don't offer the same bang for your buck as a huge industrial one, or even compared to rooftop solar for a home.
Interesting. So it's like solar gives you independence and manageable upfront cost for your home.
Correct. Crucial savings, lower total cost to get started.
While wind, it gives utilities brute power and lower unit cost, but you need massive scale.
Exactly. It's accessibility versus raw output capacity. Location and scale are absolutely everything.
Okay, that makes sense. You're building an energy empire, you chase the wind, you want to cut your home energy bill, you look to the sun.
That's a good summary.
All right, but we can't stop there. We have to talk about the environment beyond just, less CO2. Both are vital for climate goals, right? That 50% emissions cut by 2030, net zero by 2050, we need these.
Absolutely critical, indispensable. But yes, we have to be honest about the other environmental impacts, the physical side effects of building and operating these things.
The localized stuff.
Yeah, the stuff people sometimes gloss over because they think green energy means zero impact, which isn't quite true.
Okay, let's start with wind's issues. What are the main drawbacks highlighted in the sources? Noise comes up a lot.
Noise is one, yeah. That low-frequency hum can bother people living nearby. And aesthetics, some people just find rows and rows of giant turbines visually disruptive. Spoil the view, they say.
Understandable. But what about more direct ecological impacts?
That's the bigger concern flagged in the research. Wildlife interference, specifically birds and bats.
Flying into the blades.
Sadly, yes. The blades move incredibly fast at the tips, and collision mortality is a real issue. It contributes to population declines for some species. There are efforts to mitigate it, like temporary shutdowns during migration, but it's a definite downside.
And building them isn't impact-free either, right? All that steel and concrete.
Definitely not. Huge amounts of resource extraction go into making those towers and blades, steel, concrete, rare earth elements in the generators sometimes. The manufacturing phase has its own significant footprint.
But there are trade-offs, positives on the environmental side, too.
Oh, absolutely. A key one is the ground footprint. The actual base of the tower is relatively small.
So you can still use the land around it.
Exactly. Farming, grazing, whatever. It doesn't take the whole area out of commission. And critically important, wind turbines use virtually no water for cooling during operation. That's massive, especially in dry regions.
Okay, good points. Now, solar's turn. What are its hidden environmental costs? Because just sitting on a roof seems pretty harmless.
Seems that way, but the manufacturing, That's where the impact lies. It's incredibly resource and energy intensive.
To make the PV panels.
Yes, you need highly purified silicon, various metals, and mining these materials, especially things like silver, tellurium, indium, it takes a lot of energy and can cause significant local environmental damage where the mining happens, often far away from where the panel ends up.
And chemicals. I remember reading something about that.
That's another factor. Making the actual photovoltaic cells can involve some pretty hazardous chemicals, cadmium telluride, gallium arsenide in some types. If the factories don't handle the waste streams perfectly, those chemicals are a real risk to local ecosystems, water tables.
Right. And what about the big solar farms? Utility scale solar.
Yeah, when you scale solar up to that level, like covering acres of desert, that requires clearing huge tracts of land.
Which means habitat loss.
Exactly. Native plants, animal habitats, they get removed. It displaces biodiversity, just like building anything else large scale does. It's not impact-free land use.
But solar has its mitigating factors too, like wind.
It does. Once installed, like wind, solar uses very little water during operation. That's a plus. And we're seeing really interesting developments now, like agrivoltaics.
Over what?
Agrivoltaics. Basically, installing solar panels elevated above farmland. They provide shade, which can actually help certain crops or reduce heat stress for livestock while still generating power. So potential for synergy there.
Huh, interesting. So synthesizing all that. Both have issues beyond just carbon.
They do. Resource extraction, manufacturing impacts, localized ecological concerns like bird mortality for wind or land clearing for big solar farms. But, and this is the crucial context, the baseline. Both wind and solar, despite these secondary issues, are still fundamentally far, far less dangerous and damaging to the planet's long-term health than continuing to rely on extracting and burning fossil fuels. That comparison always needs to be top of mind.
Right. Perspective is key. So let's try to wrap this up. We started asking, which is better, solar or wind? What's the verdict after this deep dive?
Well, the clear consensus from everything we looked at is it's the wrong question. One isn't inherently better overall.
It depends.
It totally depends on your needs, first and foremost. Are you a homeowner wanting lower bills and some independence? Solar's probably your answer.
Easier access, lower startup cost.
Right. Are you a utility needing massive amounts of the cheapest possible clean energy for the grid? You're looking at large-scale wind, provided you have a good location.
Location, location, location.
Yeah.
Sunshine versus reliable wind.
Exactly. And ultimately, to really transition away from fossil fuels like we need to, we can't afford to pick just one. We need a mix. We need lots of both, deployed smartly.
So it's not either, it's yes and where.
Precisely. We need every renewable tool we have. Any shift towards renewables is a step in the right direction.
Okay, before we go, let's crystallize that key takeaway for everyone listening.
Nugget.
The knowledge nugget. Wind power, technically more efficient at conversion. We're talking 20 to 40%.
Right.
But solar, much more accessible, cost-effective, and practical for the individual homeowner trying to gain energy independence.
Couldn't say it better, which leads nicely into that final thought to chew on.
Go for it.
Okay, so we said the big headache for residential wind is cost and complexity, right?
Yeah.
And solar's main weakness is its reliance on consistent sunshine, the availability issue, which storage helps solve.
Right. Batteries are key for solar.
Exactly. So here's a thought. Battery tech, lithium-ion, other chemistries, it's improving incredibly fast. Costs are dropping. Capacity is increasing. What happens if battery technology gets so good, so cheap, that it effectively eliminates that solar intermittency problem entirely?
Meaning solar could reliably provide power 2047, even in less sunny places, just by storing daytime energy.
Potentially, yes. If storage becomes near perfect and affordable, does that make solar the universally dominant choice? Pushing wind mainly into just specialized large-scale utility roles? Could advancements in storage totally tip the scales?
Eliminating the availability disadvantage. That would change the game significantly. Definitely something to think about.
Something to mull over.
The future of storage.
Yeah.
Sounds like another deep dive is needed soon. Thanks for joining us for this exploration of wind and solar. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.